Hi, I'm Sally Breckenridge and I'm back for the second half of a video on weaving with a rigid heddle loom using multiple heddles to map to a draft in iWeaveIt that use multiple shafts. In the previous video I did the threading, and that's important for you to watch because that's the hardest part, is to get the loom threaded. For this video I'm going to talk about the treadling and the sett. So we will start with looking at iWeaveIt. This is the draft we have been working on. In the last video we did the threading and figured out how to thread the rigid heddle loom for this draft. In this video we're going to look at the treadling and determine how to treadle those rigid heddles. Drafts are usually written for floor looms, and floor looms have treadles on them that are tying the shafts and the pick so that you know which ones to lift. That's what this section right here is. The treadling of those tie-ups is here. So to see which shafts I lift, I look at the first pick and I see it is lifting shaft 1. I look at the second pick and it is lifting shaft 2. I look at the third pick and it is lifting shaft 3. How does that relate to our threading key? A quick look at the threading key from the previous video. On the threading key for shaft 1, we lifted the heddle of shaft 1. For shaft 2, we put both heddles down, and for shaft 3, we put the second heddle up. And that's what you would do to weave this pattern, depending on which one that you see. Now I want to look at a different pattern. So I'm going to open the files here. Do I want to save that one? No, not right now. This is the same threading, but instead, when you look at the tie-up, it's lifting 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 1 and 3. Now on a rigid heddle loom, using our heddle keys, that might look a little awkward because for treadle 1, for the first pick, you're lifting shaft 1 and 2. Our treadle key says you lift the first heddle up for shaft 1 and you put both heddles down for shaft 2. That's where there seems to be a conflict of how you can do that. As it turns out, the way you handle that is, instead of putting shaft 1 all the way up, you leave shaft 1 in the neutral position. So now we'll look at the loom and see what those positions look like. I've positioned my camera so that you can see the shed when I lift it. So I am going to lift heddle 1. That represents shaft 1. And you can see that there's a shed, and all of the threads that we have lifted, or that we have assigned to shaft 1, are lifted. I'll put that one back down in the neutral position and lift the back heddle. The back heddle creates a shaft, and again we have a shed, and this time the shed is lifting all of the threads that we've assigned to shaft 3. The down shaft, and I'm going to put both of them down, and you see a shed right here, right there, and that shed is lifting all of the shafts, all of the threads that we have assigned to shaft 2. There are other combinations. Sometimes you see one that says, I want to lift shaft 1 and shaft 2. Well, that's kind of odd because shaft 2 says both of the heddles should be down, and shaft 1 says it should be up. Now, how can it be both ways? And if you want it both ways, you put it in the neutral position. So for shaft 1 and 2, I have the heddle 3, the second back heddle is down, but the front heddle, which we assign to shaft 1 here, that shaft is in the neutral position, and what I get is a shed that's lifting all of the threads on shafts 1 and 2. Likewise, if I put shaft 1, heddle 1 down and heddle 2 in the neutral position, I get a shaft, a shed that lifts all of the threads on shaft 2 and shaft 3. So that gives me all the combinations that I need or that are possible with a 3-shaft draft. And I can weave anything using one of those sheds. Rather than watch me struggle with the heddles on this loom, I've already woven the first draft, the one that we just finished doing. I created a treadle draft plan. This shows the treadle to be lifted. This shows the lift plan, so it's the same in this case. And this is my heddle plan. So when I weave 1 up, I weave the heddle 1 up. 2 up, I need to weave heddle down and heddle 2 down. 3 up, I need to weave with heddle 2 up, 2 down, both heddles are down. And you see the design here, and you get these little diamonds. You will notice that the diamonds are more compressed, and that's because the set is a little wide, and we'll address that a little bit later. This is the second draft that we looked at, and in this case the treadling is the same, but instead the tie-up or lift plan was changed to lift 2 shafts at a time. This shows the heddle mapping. When I lift 1 and 2, heddle 1 is neutral, heddle 2 is down. To lift 2 and 3, heddle 1 is down, heddle 2 is neutral. When I want to lift 1 and 3, heddle 1 is up and heddle 2 is up. And 2 and 3 gives heddle 1 down and heddle 2 down. While I was weaving, I just found that I just followed my heddle plan, and I was able to weave that. Again, you will notice that it looks a little different than the draft because the set is too wide and the weft is smashing in a little bit more than it should. So now we'll look at the set. This is another draft that I have downloaded from handweaving.net. It's a simple draft and a nice pattern and a good one for you to practice your weaving on. If you look at the tie-up, you'll see that it's using all the combinations of the treadles. And you look at the treadling and it goes through all of those. Let's look at the threading diagram. This is the heddle plan that I created for our new 3-shaft draft. It is simply a straight draw, 1, 2, 3. So the first thread goes through heddle 1, The second thread, according to my key, is the down, and it goes through down. And so the third shaft goes through heddle 2 and then through a slot. It turns out that when I have this 3 shaft draft with straight draw, it repeats right there. If I count how many pairs I have here between the 2 dotted lines, which represent 1 inch on my heddle, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. That'll give me an 8-dent heddle. But if I count the threads, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I have 12 threads in that inch. So I'm actually weaving 12 EPI for this draft. So that would actually set all the threads closer, and that might be a good choice for my yarn. Now let's look at a different draft. Your friends would be pretty impressed to see that you wove this draft on a 2-heddle rigid heddle loom because it has such large diamonds. And that's created by repeating straight draw threading several times. The other impact of that is, as we saw in the previous draft, is that the set becomes tighter. And what happens is that at each point of the draft, it will space it out. But if you keep repeating the same one, it tightens it up. You can use that principle to adjust your set to what you want. So let's look at the threading plan for this draft. This is the heddle pattern that I used for the draft we just looked at. I've written the threading here on the top 3 lines. I've put in my heddle key, 1, down for 2, heddle 2, up for 3. Then I have drawn my lines here, and you can see it packs in pretty well when I'm doing 1, 3, 2, 1. But when I get over to the point, which is right here, this is the 3, this 3, and I go down here, I have to go to the next one. It's on shaft 2, and that is a down treadle. I have to go to here. I have to skip this hole, and I go along to the end here, and I have to, I guess I drew that backwards. It should go this way. But this is the last empty one here, and that's the end of the slots. When I looked at this and count this out, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 1.5 inches to here, from the start to the here is 1.5 inches. And I have 16 warps, so my EPI is 12 when I use this draft. So each draft will be unique in what the set has to be, and you have to pay attention. If you wanted to make it in a wider set, you could space it out. You could use different reed sizes, but you do have to pay attention to the set. Now you can see the draft of what I've woven. To make this easier, we can use iWeaveIt to help us with the tracking. One of the things that you can use iWeaveIt for is to start your tracking. I'll dismiss this. If I open up the track treadling and I pick start tracking, apparently it doesn't like my, now we'll use that, start tracking. Then it shows you to do shaft 1, and you can see that you lift 1. Hopefully I can do that without knocking over the iPad. I lift 1, I throw my shuttle. I'm not going to do it because the iPad's in the way. Then I just tap on the screen anywhere, here, 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 anywhere, and it goes to the next shaft. And then when I complete that treadle, I go to that and I tap that, and it says to do treadle 3. And I follow my heddle key that I maybe position somewhere else close. And I can track this. You also have the option, stop tracking options, to track by group. So let's say I really want to just do it by every 4. So no, every 3 is better for this pattern. So let's use that. Done. So now it's showing me to do 3, 1, 2. I start tracking. I tap it. Now we do 3, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2. 3, 1. Now we do 3, 2, 1 because we're down here. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 3, 1. And you can do it by groups of 3. And this will help you keep track of it without having to use sticky notes and create a lengthy heddle plan. You can just create the heddle key. This is a fun draft to weave, and you will dazzle all your friends with your ability to weave with double heddles on a rigid heddle loom. This is an impressive draft for that feature. So I hope you've learned something from this video and the previous video on threading. Be sure to check out iWeaveIt at weaveit.com or on your iPad in the App Store. Just search on iWeaveIt. Thank you for your patience in watching all of this video.